From indomitable fortified structures to secret hideaways buried deep beneath the ground, bunkers offer protection from one's enemies and the hope of a refuge in the face of unthinkable danger. One of the largest, most secret bunkers ever built lies nestled in a lush and remote pocket of the Allegheny Mountains, near White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The luxurious Greenbrier Hotel and Recreational Facility is a 5-hour drive from the nation's capital. This 6,500-acre resort is a playground for the rich and famous. The 531-room main hotel is complemented by 3 golf courses and innumerable amenities. But this old Southern-style mansion belies a deep secret. Behind this utility door, marked high voltage to keep out the curious, lies the entrance to one of the largest, most secret bunkers of the Cold War.
I'm standing at the wheel of a 25-ton blast door. This is one of 4 entrances into the bunker itself. We're standing at the west tunnel entrance. This particular door, as well as the other 3 doors, all have to be manually operated. It is 10 by 18, 18 inches thick, and it swings freely in closing it to lock it into place.
This bunker was designed to protect not an individual or small group, but every member of the United States Congress in the event of a nuclear strike. Codenamed Greek Island, the facility was encased by up to 3 feet of steel-reinforced concrete, with portions resting nearly 100 feet beneath the ground.
This bunker really was an amazing project in the sense that it was not just a big concrete box. It was a site where a whole segment of the government come down. They could live here, they could sleep here, they could eat here. All their physical needs were taken care of.
18 Spartan dormitories with a capacity of 60 individuals each comprised the core of the bunker. A dining facility able to feed 400 at a time, and chambers large enough to accommodate sessions by both the House of Representatives and Senate completed the complex. Enough food and water were stored to sustain the lawmakers for 60 days. Meanwhile, 42,000 gallons of diesel fuel was available to feed 3 generators, providing power for over a month. For government planners, this seemed a long enough period to ensure delivery of more supplies. Built in 1958, the construction of the Greenbrier bunker was shrouded in secrecy.
So the challenge was, the government is asking the Greenbrier and its owners, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, to build a huge 112,000 square foot steel reinforced concrete bunker right next to a major luxury resort hotel without anybody noticing what they're doing. So how are we going to do this is the issue. And they come up with a very clever idea, which is we're going to build it right in front of everybody's nose.
The plan called for the Greenbrier Hotel to build a new wing. Work on the new building would mask construction of the mammoth subterranean bunker. Tons of excavated earth from beneath the hotel were quietly disposed of by building an additional 9-hole golf course. But the simultaneous construction of the hotel and bunker led to some interesting compromises.
An unusual aspect to this secret bunker is that a portion of it, about 1/5 of the square footage, was in fact available to Greenbrier guests. In fact, situations would arise where you'd be standing there and somebody would sort of say, hey, I understand there's a secret bunker at the Greenbrier. And you say, no, there's no such thing. And there you were, standing inside of this secret bunker.
The room behind me was used by many thousands of Greenbrier guests. They never realized it was part of the bunker. Hidden behind this secret panel is an 18-ton blast door. When closed, it seals off the bunker from the hotel.
Despite the government's best efforts, covert construction and hidden doors could not keep the bunker secret. A Washington Post article in 1992 blew its cover. effectively destroying the facility as thoroughly as a nuclear bomb. Given the accuracy and power of today's weapons, a bunker is only as good as its anonymity. The newly exposed Greenbrier was retired, but most certainly not before another top-secret congressional bunker was opened to take its place. With secrecy at a premium, it goes without saying that the best bunkers in the world are the ones we know nothing about. The President of the United States is said to have access to a network of top-secret bunkers, probably located on or near military bases around the country. In addition, the President relies on a sort of flying bunker, Air Force One. Able to refuel in mid-air, the plane can stay aloft indefinitely or be flown to any number of secret hideouts. Bunkers, of course, can protect us from the enemy, but they can also protect the enemy from us. That's why building bunkers is only half of any country's defensive challenge. Learning how to smash through bunkers is equally important. Beneath this desert landscape sits a state-of-the-art fortified defensive position, a military bunker. Safely hidden from sight, the bunker is built of concrete and reinforced steel and protected by tons of earth. But it is about to be utterly destroyed. The GBU-28 Bunker Buster bomb has been specially designed to destroy hardened underground targets.
The GBU-28 is this weapon right here. In the front, it's got a laser detector where we can spot a laser on the ground, and this weapon will fly directly to that spot very accurately.
The heart of this bomb is a 5,000-pound warhead. But it is the brains of the weapon that make it especially effective against bunkers.
A fuse is a little device used to set off this warhead, and what it'll enable this weapon to do is actually count the floors it's going through in an underground bunker. So it can actually sense different stories, and we can have it go off in the precise room where a critical computer, radio transmitter, maybe even weapons of mass destruction are located.
Weapons such as the GBU-28 underscore a fact that bunker builders have struggled with since the dawn of the nuclear age. The destructive power unleashed by today's weapons is far greater than any structure can withstand. But that has not stopped people from trying to build the perfect bunker. One of the most impressive bunkers in the world lies beneath 9,565-foot Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Entombed nearly a third of a mile under this massive granite peak sits the Cheyenne Mountain Operations Center.
The reason that the United States established Cheyenne Mountain as a bunker was to create a central facility within which it could collect information initially about bomber attacks against the United States, hence its name, the North American Air Defense Command, NORAD, and later to warn the United States of an attack with ballistic missiles that presumably would have been launched from the Soviet Union.
Built in 1966, Cheyenne Mountain was one of the deepest and best protected military bunkers on the planet. The facility was specially designed to withstand a near hit by a nuclear device. Shielded by the mountain, the 15-building complex was shock isolated on hundreds of 3-foot steel springs. In the event of an attack, these springs would provide a moving barrier between the facility and shifting earth. 25-ton blast doors seal the 4.5-acre facility, protecting the military and civilian staff from the force and heat of a nuclear blast. Nearly 1,200 people can survive in this mountain for up to 3 weeks. At a cost of $142.4 million, the massive bunker jointly run by the United States and Canada is still active, protecting the personnel and equipment that scan the skies for enemy attacks. But few experts believe even this bunker could withstand a barrage from today's nuclear arsenal.
In the early days, nuclear weapons were not terribly accurate. A place like Cheyenne Mountain, for example, with the NORAD headquarters was reasonably safe because it was unlikely they could be directly hit. But today, with super accurate missiles, there's virtually no place that's invulnerable.
Not even a bunker in the middle of a mountain. Next, cannons and forts face off, while high explosives bring armies to new lows during World War I. Bunkers are relatively recent creations on the military fortification family tree. But the story of defensive structures goes back to ancient times and the beginnings of war.
Fortifications have existed as long as people have built buildings. From the very earliest ages, there was a need to defend against some sort of hostile threat. And as technology advanced, the need to improve those defenses to meet that technology also increased.
For thousands of years, fortified positions had the upper hand during battle. Ancient siege machines were so ineffective against citadels and walled cities that attacking armies often resorted to treachery. During the legendary Trojan War, the Greeks spent 9 years trying to breach the walls of Troy. They finally succeeded after convincing the Trojans to accept a giant gift horse made of wood. Greek soldiers hidden inside the horse waited until they were safely through the city gates to mount their attack. The clandestine Greeks bear testament to the near invulnerability of early strongholds. From primitive forts of earth and rock to medieval castles of carved stone, these fortifications enabled a relatively small number of defenders to hold off armies many times their size. The first real challenge to defensive superiority came with the invention of the cannon, a powerful yet relatively mobile siege weapon. First used in the 14th century, projectiles fired from cannons forced builders to construct thicker walls to safeguard the structures within.
When artillery first came along, the first attempt that the military engineers tried to do was to make their walls thicker and stronger. But that didn't work. As artillery got better, it was able to knock down the stone walls no matter how thick they made them.
Military engineers responded by sinking fortress walls into the ground, using the earth to absorb a shell's impact. The new defensive technique, coupled with the relative inaccuracy of early artillery, shifted the advantage back to the defender, where it remained well into the 19th century.
We've reached a stage where the technology of war makes fixed, known facilities highly vulnerable. Once you have accurate artillery, you have the ability to destroy a facility. It might take you days or weeks, but very few things can withstand long-term assault with artillery.
The American Civil War saw the first widespread use of these more accurate weapons. In 1862, just 2 years after the start of hostilities, the Confederate-held Fort Pulaski on Cockspur Island in Savannah, Georgia, bore the brunt of an attack using newly developed rifle-barreled cannons. Union shells fired from these weapons were stunningly accurate. Fort Pulaski's 7.5-foot thick walls were pummeled by artillery fired more than a mile away. The dominance of ramped earth and stone walls was quickly coming to an end. The introduction of high explosives at the end of the 19th century made forts even more obsolete.
High explosives were capable of doing a great amount of damage, more than any masonry or earth wall could sustain. So then there was a need to develop a new technology to deal with that. And the technology that they came up with was reinforced concrete.
At the turn of the 20th century, both France and Germany began to use the new technology to strengthen existing forts. Neither country realized that just 15 years later, the hardened structures would be at the center of the greatest battles of the First World War. Germans built the first true military bunkers and incorporated them into their trench lines during World War I. These relatively small structures made of steel and reinforced concrete defended German troops, command centers, and weapons against the nearly 5 million tons of explosives fired by the Allies. Here in the French countryside lay the remnants of a World War I concrete bunker. Less than 120 kilometers north of Paris, this structure was once part of a 250-mile trench and bunker complex, comprising the famed Western Front. Today, the bunker's rusting steel reinforcing rods protrude from the crumbling concrete shell, as it marks the boundary between a bean patch and a field of wheat. During the war, machine gunners inside these bunkers were blinded by smoke and deafened by the sound of their weapons reverberating off the bare walls. But being inside the bunker was far preferable to being outside. Firing through slits, known as embrasures, bunker gunners took a terrible toll in Allied lives. So hated were the machine gunners that upon surrendering, they were often executed by vengeful soldiers. Still, the bunkers were remarkably successful.
One of the reasons that the bunker concept really took hold was the realization that the old-fashioned fort was really a case of putting all of your eggs in one basket. A fort was considered to be a target, and damage to one portion could potentially damage another portion. So you wanted to disperse your defense as much as possible, and that led to putting everything in isolated bunkers.
France and Germany each suffered nearly 1.5 million casualties in the Great War. The catastrophic losses prompted both countries to create bunker and defensive line fortifications on an unprecedented scale. The French began construction on the Maginot Line in 1929, a 200-mile defensive barrier that they believed would keep Germany at bay. Stretching over much of the northern and eastern borders of France and incorporating many natural barriers, the mammoth structure may be the greatest bunker complex ever built.
The Maginot Line used the theory of a thin, tough skin. A very narrow but very strong line of fortifications that was designed to repulse the enemy.
The fortification consisted of a line of strong, mutually supporting, completely self-sufficient bunkers. Armed with machine guns and anti-tank weapons, much of the line bristled with artillery. Some of the structures were connected via tunnel to a subterranean support complex containing a command post, living quarters, storage facilities, and power plant. In short, everything necessary to make them fully independent. The largest structures within the line utilized integrated rail systems to move men and ammunition. Taken as a whole, the Maginot Line was a formidable obstacle to any hostile advance. But it would not fulfill the French desire to keep the Germans out. In 1940, soon after the outbreak of World War II, Hitler's forces completely circumvented the Maginot Line by first invading Luxembourg and Belgium to the north, and then descending into France.
Between the wars, the Germans in particular developed a new approach to warfare. They'd seen what happened in trench warfare, and they didn't want to repeat it. And they looked at ways to avoid repeating that. The French, on the other hand, were basically still ready to fight the First World War. They weren't prepared for what the Germans did, and when the Germans went round the Maginot Line, they had no counter.
After overrunning most of France, the Germans circled back to finally take on the Maginot Line. But even when attacked from behind, the French fortifications were exceptionally difficult to destroy. The Germans unleashed heavy artillery fired from a distance. But bringing forward special guns and zeroing in on the target took precious time. For the lightning-fast German war machine, the best offense against bunkers was infantry soldiers. The many different types of bunkers in the Maginot Line meant that no one textbook maneuver worked. Most plans involved first blinding the bunkers with flamethrowers, then moving in close, to plant an explosive device known as a satchel charge. Though the bunkers were clearly vulnerable, they had proven their effectiveness. So much so that while the Germans fought to crush the remaining Maginot bunkers, they also built similar concrete structures on the western seaboard of France to protect their newly conquered territory. But like the bunkers of the Maginot Line, the German fortifications would prolong the battle, but ultimately lose the war. Next, the weapons of the Second World War force engineers to construct some of the greatest bunkers ever built. German submarines were the bane of Allied ships during the Second World War. Patrolling the waters of the North Atlantic, the submarines stopped American supplies and troops from reaching European ports. When submerged, these stealthy hunters were almost unstoppable. But above water, they were nearly helpless, particularly vulnerable when taking on supplies or being repaired. Building a bunker to protect a single 250-foot submarine would be a major undertaking. But on the northeastern shores of occupied France, Germany built a submarine bunker complex to house not one, but up to 24 of their U-boats. 3 mammoth block structures comprise the submarine complex in the seaside village of Lorient. Inside these bunkers lay a small city, able to house and protect the submarines, as well as perform repairs and store tons of ammunition, torpedoes, and fuel to supply the underwater killers.
To build this phenomenal structure, they obviously needed a lot of workers. Nearly 15,000 prisoners labored for 2 years to build the base.
Most of the labor went into constructing the roofs of the buildings. The bunker's ceilings were built of steel-reinforced concrete over 10 feet thick to protect against enemy bombs. The third and largest building has 2 roofs, making it nearly impenetrable.
The first ceiling measures 3.5 meters thick and covers the entire building. Then there is an airspace, on top of which there is a second roof which covers approximately 2/3 of the bunker.
The roofs were so well built, they forced the British to develop special 6-ton bunker buster bombs called tall boys. On August 6, 1944, the Royal Air Force scored a direct hit. This 15-foot wide crater on top of the roof is the result of the monstrous blast. But despite the tremendous explosion, the weapon was only able to penetrate a few feet. The roof was so thick, nearly 20 feet of solid reinforced concrete remained intact to protect the facility below. The tall boy at least managed to land on the roof. Most other bombs earmarked for the bunker and the planes carrying them never came close. Over the course of the war, nearly 20,000 German soldiers were assigned to anti-aircraft batteries atop the bunker complex and throughout the surrounding city. Successful attacks by Allied pilots were nearly impossible. Aerial frontal attacks on the bunker were equally difficult. Many of the submarine pens have water-level blast doors that were lowered at the first sign of trouble. The barrier would stop torpedoes and specially designed skipping bombs from literally entering through the front door. For additional protection, the Germans scuttled 2 ships in the harbor. 200 yards from the bunker's entrance, the sunken ships provided an additional barrier to defend against torpedo attacks. The bunkers were impervious to nearly every weapon in the Allied arsenal. Still, they were vulnerable. The Lorient bunkers depended upon a steady stream of goods and materials to operate properly. Once the Allies realized they could not destroy the bunkers outright, they turned to cutting the supply lines, Unfortunately for the French, the bunker's supply lines ran directly through the city of Lorient.
60,000 bombes, ça.
60,000 bombs fell on the city, and only 70 buildings were left standing in the town center after the war. The whole city had to be rebuilt. Fortunately, the Lorient population was completely evacuated before the bombing started. So on a human level, there were few victims, but on a material level, we lost everything.
Lorient suffered the same devastating fate as many European cities during the war. But unlike Lorient, other cities were rarely able to evacuate beforehand. In London, German bombers showered the city with high explosives and incendiary bombs. The citizens sought refuge underground. Bunkers and hastily converted subway tunnel shelters protected the people while the city above them burned.
The bombs that were raining down on London at that time, and indeed not just London, but practically every major city in the UK, were doing incredible damage. A stick of bombs could devastate a whole area, literally flatten buildings, destroy streets, destroy people's way of life. And you might go down to an underground shelter, maybe a tube shelter, or even just a street shelter, and come out and find your whole street had literally just disappeared.
Disappearing was not an option for the British government, and in particular Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who refused to leave London, worried that his absence would demoralize the British people. But where could high-level British officials take refuge as the bombs fell? The British addressed that question by building a top-secret, high-tech command bunker in the center of London. Converted from a series of small basement storerooms in 1938, the Cabinet War Room served as the underground nerve center from which Churchill and his war cabinet led the fight.
The configuration of the Cabinet War Rooms in 1940 was about 21 rooms, making up about 1,000 square meters. But when it extended in 1941 to 45, it occupied somewhere in the region of about 100 rooms and was literally 3 times as big.
Located under the present-day Treasury building, the bunker is within walking distance of both Parliament and number 10 Downing Street. But it was chosen less for its size and location than for its strength.
The building had a steel frame in it. Steel frame building technology was relatively new or even revolutionary at that time. It wouldn't necessarily stop a bomb, but it would hopefully withstand better if a bomb ever hit it.
Unconcerned with aesthetics, British builders left these exposed steel girders visible in nearly every major room of the bunker. Oak joists shored up the smaller rooms and kept the ceiling from crashing down during bombing raids.
I think the planners knew when it became a headquarters building that it wasn't, properly speaking, bomb-proof. But it was only at the end of 1940, so well into the bombing raids of the Blitz, which started in September of that year, that they finally began to install proper bomb-proofing. And what they put in was a layer of reinforced concrete, and quite the strongest concrete you can imagine, varying in thickness between about 5 and 10 feet, depending what it was covering.
This cutaway in the ceiling reveals the thickness of the concrete as it rests upon the steel girder subframe. But it was not just the strength of this structure that made it such an effective command bunker. Behind this unassuming bathroom door lies one of the greatest technological secrets of the entire war.
The war rooms were really Churchill's high-tech basement headquarters, and one of the highest high-tech items in it, I suppose, was the so-called transatlantic telephone. And it allowed the Prime Minister to talk to the President in complete secrecy. And it was, in effect, really the first direct secret hotline. So it was behind this humble door marked with a very basic toilet lock that some of the most secret and high-level conversations of the war were taking place.
But not every secret associated with the Cabinet War Rooms was so diligently concealed.
Cabinet War Room's code name, rather ironically, was number 2 Storey's Gate, which was its address. So I think if the Germans ever did find out about it, they had a pretty fair idea where it might be. The Germans expected Churchill to be rather deeper and rather further away from his normal premises than literally 10 feet underground, 100 yards from his official residence.
On the other side of the war, Adolf Hitler too sought shelter in underground bunkers. These bunkers were the backdrops for some of the most dramatic events in the war. The Führer survived an assassination attempt after disillusioned German officers placed a bomb in his Wolfschanze bunker complex, which was located on the border between Poland and Germany. But the most infamous bunker in the world was constructed under the Chancellery building in the heart of Berlin.
The reason that bunker survived, and it survived until the very end of the war when both Soviet and later American and other troops went in to investigate that facility, it survived because we as the Allies did not have weapons that were sufficiently accurate to destroy that bunker. What we were doing is launching aircraft and conducting raids against that bunker, but bombs in World War II had accuracies measured in hundreds if not thousands of meters, and to destroy a hardened, deep underground facility or bunker, you have to have weapons that land directly on that facility, otherwise it'll survive forever.
Though the structure survived the onslaught, Hitler did not, taking his own life inside the bunker on April 30th, 1945. With the defeat of Germany, America turned its full attention to the South Pacific and Japan. The death knell for the island nation arrived August 6th, 1945. The atomic blast on Hiroshima killed nearly 100,000 people and forever changed the landscape of peace and war. Bunkers seemed pointless against the awesome power of a nuclear blast. Yet the terrible weapon would lead to a bunker building explosion, the likes of which the world had never seen. Next, frightened Americans dig in deep, while the Air Force builds bunkers to protect the deadliest of weapons. With the onset of the Cold War and the sudden possibility of nuclear attack, paranoia gripped the American public.
You might be out playing at home when the warning.
Stop, drop, and cover became the survivalist mantra for an entire generation. The United States government did its best to allay the nation's fears.
When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about.
I think in retrospect, as we look back on that time, I think many conclude that the prospects for survival would have been very dim indeed, very dismal indeed. But this was reflective of a time in which people deeply feared that their existence was on the line, and bunkers were seen as the solution.
Despite the government's best efforts to provide protection, many Americans decided to take matters into their own hands. Backyard bomb shelters. The bunker for the man in the street became the rage. From basic store-bought models for less than $100 to specially built structures that cost as much as a house.
Hey, isn't this nice?
Well, Sir Ruth and I certainly can live in here very comfortably for at least 2 weeks. And you know, this room can be put to other uses as well.
Yes, Walt. You could use this as an extra bedroom for company.
As the United States came out of the Second World War, we had massive armies, we had developed nuclear weapons, we had crushed 2 enemies. Contrast that with the condition in the United States beginning in the 1950s when the Soviet Union in 1949 detonated a nuclear weapon. We now, for the first time in our history, faced absolute vulnerability. We never before had faced a time in which our survival, our existence, could be eradicated on the order of 30 minutes. And the reaction was to build bunkers throughout American society, both on the governmental level and the military level, as well as bunkers throughout American society, in many cases within residences.
Wall Street analysts in the 1950s projected the bomb shelter business as a potential $20 billion industry. But this was a quiet building boom. The construction and subsequent storage of food, water, and supplies in underground shelters was performed secretly, not from fear of the Russians, but from fear of one's own neighbors, fighting for cover during a missile attack. Ironically, the best Cold War bunkers did not protect people from nuclear weapons, but instead protected the nuclear weapons themselves. Buried deep in the desert flatlands outside of Tucson, Arizona, sits one of the most advanced and potentially deadly bunkers ever built. The facility and others like it were designed to protect and, if necessary, launch America's largest intercontinental ballistic missiles, the Titan IIs. Built as a retaliatory weapon, the missile could be launched in less than 10 minutes by a two-man crew, operating deep within the facility. A Soviet missile sent to destroy the bunker would take just over half an hour to reach the site. By that time, the 103-foot Titan II would be thundering toward its Russian target. Constructed in the early 60s, the Titan II missile facility is comprised of a 146-foot deep silo and adjoining command center. The structure took nearly a year and a half to build and cost over $8 million. Like the Cheyenne Mountain bunker in Colorado, the Titan II facility was built to roll with the punches in the event of a nuclear strike.
Everything in here is shock isolated from the missile down to the smallest piece of equipment. That means they're mounted on springs. So should there be a ground movement for any reason, the equipment is not going to break. It's just going to move around.
The facility could also be closed off to the outside world during an attack.
We are entering the complex. We've just come through an area that's very well constructed but not hardened against attack. But once we go through a series of 3-ton blast doors like this one, we will be in the hardened part of the complex. There's a set of blast doors protecting the control center from the outside force and another set protecting it from the silo.
But the largest door is not inside the bunker at all. It's on top. The enormous 740-ton sliding silo door could be opened in 27 seconds. When closed, the door shielded the facility to help the structure survive a near hit by a nuclear weapon. By 1963, no less than 54 Titan II missile sites were operational throughout the country, ready at a moment's notice to obliterate an enemy target. Ironically, despite their construction and secrecy, nearly all the missile sites were knocked out, though not by an enemy attack. 53 of them were dismantled as part of a mutual disarmament pact between the two superpowers. Today, the Arizona bunker is the last that remains in its original form. It now draws visitors as a National Historic Site and stands as a testament to both bunker ingenuity and just how close we came to nuclear war. Next, smart bombs wreak havoc in Iraq, while the underground bunker meets its high-tech end. The Titan II missile currently in the silo near Tucson was disarmed, drilled with holes, and left above ground for 1 month to allow Soviet satellites to verify its decommission. Bunkers will return on Modern Marvels. The Iraq War. As Operation Iraqi Freedom began, the Iraqis entrenched their forces to defend against the onslaught of U.S.-led coalition troops. Just as in Desert Storm, bunkers and fortified structures housed everything, from artillery to Saddam Hussein himself. But the sense of security provided by these bunkers was quickly shattered. Smart bombs targeted and struck even the most secret of Saddam's hidden bunkers. Nothing could have prepared the Iraqi troops for the state-of-the-art precision-guided weapons. The war with Iraq suggested bunkers are no longer viable military options when fighting well-organized and technologically advanced militaries. And the U.S. Armament Center at Eglin Air Force Base wants to make that a reality. Occupying an area 2/3 the size of Rhode Island, the Air Armament Center on the Florida Panhandle builds and tests state-of-the-art bunker-busting weapons. Here, test pilots and scientists are able to perfect the guidance and delivery systems for these bombs by dropping them as if in a real battle situation.
When we're testing bunker buster type weapons, the idea is to put the weapon on the target. Ultimately, you plan a specific route to get to the target, and you release the weapon at a specified range from the target.
The weapons are so accurate, they can be dropped by planes up to 10 miles away and hit within feet of their target. Special fuses, guidance systems, and the ability to burrow underground make these bombs perfect bunker killers. But how do you test the individual components of a weapon that travels over 1,000 feet per second and is vaporized within milliseconds after impact?
We use our sled track tests.
3, 2, 1.
These sled tracks are like a railroad track going down for a long distance. We put rocket motors behind an actual bomb, and we have these things propelled down at the exact same speed that they would see when they hit the ground. At the end of the sled track, we build an actual bunker. We'll build it with the protection that we normally see in the ground. We have the hardened concrete, we have layers of dirt, and with that, what you can see is that we can test any of our warheads very effectively, just like it were flight tested.
High-speed cameras and electronic test equipment catch the apocalyptic destruction unleashed in a fraction of a second.
I do see a time when bunkers will no longer be a utility military protection, because we do have much more capable weapons in our inventory.
Despite their practical limitations, bunkers still continue to be built. Humans will always have an instinctual need to be protected and taken out of harm's way. The bunker mentality is as old as nearly any thought process. And as long as this persists, presidents, dictators, and common people alike will quietly dig into the earth in search of a degree of protection that may no longer be obtainable.